My name is Ryan Lewis, and I am the academic program consultant for social studies in the secondary. I'm joined by Heather Ransom, who's the academic program consultant for the elementary. And we are today going to be leading you all through the updates to the civics literacy requirement. And we're going to walk through a couple of different things today. Um, most importantly, um, most importantly, um, we want to provide you all with the support that you need to implement the civics requirement. We are going to go for about 45 minutes or so. We do have time allotted for questions. So if you do have questions, please wait and you can ask those or drop them in the chat at the very end. So let's go ahead and get started. So as many of you all know, KRS 158 provides that beginning with the entering ninth grade class of the 25-26 school year, and each year thereafter, graduation requirements for each student in every public high school in Kentucky will graduating with a regular diploma will include the successful completion of either a 1/2 credit civics course or the passing or the successful passing of a civics test composed of 100 questions drawn from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration test itself. What is important to understand is that the KDE provides guidance for helping school districts in school to fulfill this particular requirement. To meet the civic literacy requirement, districts shall implement at least one of the following options. And there are three that we would like to talk about today, but we would really like to focus on the first. The most important, and we believe the most engaging and one that is available, is a 1/2 civic literacy credit in addition to the 3 existing social studies credits required for graduation. This is a little bit different in the fact that we are giving the option for school districts to go above and beyond the 3 credit hours that are normally given to any high school or secondary situation. And so that is something where some schools and districts might need some significant help preparing them. The other option is to have the 1/2 civic literacy credit embedded within an already existing social studies class. Finally, there's always the option of the civics test composed of 100 questions drawn from the immigration test and naturalization test. So one of the things that's really important to remember is that the Kentucky Academic Standards for Social Studies already supports civic literacy in a variety of different ways. If you're looking at the actual bill itself here, there's a lot of things that are covered underneath this particular requirement, which is already supported by the standards that we have. So for example, if you're looking at America's foundational documents, that is already incorporated within our social studies standards. And so looking at principles of the US government, the Constitution of Kentucky, those kinds of requirements are already supported by the CAS for social studies. One of the things that we would like to showcase are some additional resources and supports that might help districts out. Before we get into those and we bring a few guests on to help us out, one thing to remember is that the KDE does recommend but cannot necessarily compel different school districts or schools to use different kinds of educational resources. We can recommend, but local curriculum is left up to superintendents and the local school boards. So today we would like to invite 2 guests to help showcase some of the ways that they can be supportive to fulfilling the civic literacy. I first want to welcome Dr. Carly Mutertes. Carly is one of the lead authors of the Kentucky Civic Seal, and she is going to walk us through different ways that the Civic Seal can help promote and help sustain that 1/2 credit civic literacy in Kentucky schools. So Carly, go ahead.
Hey everybody, it's good to see you and several familiar names in that list. What I'm going to do is quickly review the components of the Kentucky Civic Seal and how that supports a civics literacy course. Now, what you see on that slide right now are, go back real quick and then we'll go, is the 4 primary components of the Kentucky Civic Seal. What it asks of students is that they complete a civic engagement project, which can look like a variety of things, and we'll talk about that in a second. And in that project, they would demonstrate knowledge of governance and democratic principles, which aligns already very tightly with the civics literacy course, half credit course. Practice information literacy, which means demonstrate that they are critical consumers of information and critical consumers of their research products. And then they participate in self-reflection. You can go to the next slide, which is mainly just contact. But so there's more information at the Kentucky Civic Seal website at kycivicseal.org. But Ryan, if you actually go to the one where we have the project types, I think that's going to be the most, oh, actually we'll go here. Go back to, I can go in any order. So the Civic Seal program, as articulated here, this is a program that was started several years ago by the Kentucky Council for the Social Studies and the Kentucky Civic Education Coalition. That is the civic education arm of the Kentucky Council for Social Studies. We partnered up with Secretary of State Michael Adams several years ago, seeing the SEAL as a program to strengthen authentic, meaningful civic learning in our schools. So the idea there is not that a program like this solves every problem, but that it does encourage students to act in democratic ways, but also are given meaningful opportunities to apply what they learn in the classroom out of the classroom. So go to the next one. Like I said, there's four main components. We do have a lot of documentation if you want to review that. But one thing that's really important for this program is that the SEAL was designed to not be in competition with other programs like the Center for Civic Ed, which is going to be speaking here in a minute, or any other programs that might exist within the context of your course, but rather is a way to incentivize those kinds of programs and really push learning towards that authentic space. So when we talk about authentic, what that means is that we're not just doing things for the sake of them. We're learning the content and skills of good citizenship so that it can be applied. So on this slide, what you'll see are different project examples that can live in the civics literacy course, and also are a good foundation to apply that content. So the course really facilitates students to be able to not only complete summative assignments that demonstrate their knowledge, but then are given an opportunity to apply that out of the classroom in a way that makes sense to the teacher, to the context, to the student. And this is one thing I always try to emphasize. When people think about civic engagement, they often think about big, grandiose things. But really how we apply what we learn out of the classroom, how we engage with one another, the decisions we make, how we're informed in how we talk to our neighbors, how we live in those spaces, how we contact elected officials. Those are all different varieties of ways that people engage in civic ways. So one thing that you'll see on this slide are for the Civic Seal, we want it to be shared out of the classroom in some way, but that doesn't mean it has to be a big to-do. We do have schools that will have like civic expos, similar to like a science fair where students share their work. But the idea could be that students engage and learn about civic issues and then share their informed opinion with another class, like through a deliberation or an informed conversation. And there's also on the right side panel more traditional ways, if you will, sharing your informed perspective with a city council person, um, volunteer, and that's one thing too. I'll really emphasize is when I was a classroom teacher, my students did all kinds of volunteering, but it wasn't always informed. So the idea here would be that your civic engagement project can be volunteering as long as they know why they're volunteering, and what good they are doing. Instead of, as my kids would do, bring expired bean cans and think I'm saving the world with these. Like, no, those get tossed out and create more work for organizations. So that's the idea here, is that civic engagement, how we live in the world, what we do, it looks like a variety of things, but the Civic Seal is really emphasizing that process of knowledge building and being informed in that. So for this half credit course, the idea is really that it complements it really well, in that the content is going to lead to earning the seal. And the only shift would be, if students are doing a PSA, how does it get shared instead of just staying in the classroom? And then that makes it a very authentic civic action. Ryan, I think next one. It might be my last one. Might just be contact. So that was, a very quick overview of the Civic Seal. Again, the idea here is that we're incentivizing or encouraging taking what's happening in the classroom and applying it out of the classroom in a variety of different ways. So the civics course really lends itself well to students being able to earn those seals from the Secretary of State. If you want more information, we have our website there. We have all kinds of resources, including some curricular resources that can be adapted and applied. We also have the United We Stand is a white paper that reviews some of the research about why this is so beneficial to kiddos for both academic and social reasons. And that's also my contact information. If you have any questions or just need some support in thinking about the seal, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Carly, that's great. We really appreciate your time. That is a really short overview of the Civic Seal, which can provide so many different things. Thank you for promoting civic literacy in Kentucky. Next, we have another guest. We would like to introduce Emily Voss from the Center for Civic Education to speak about two resources that they have that will support this work in Kentucky as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate the chance to join everybody today. Indeed, my name is Emily Voss, and I'm here to represent the Center for Civic Ed. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and we've been around since 1965. And for those 60 years, we have partnered with states, districts, and educators all over the country to strengthen our civic and constitutional education. And our work does span all 50 states and U.S. territories. And our focus has always been on helping students build the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that they need formed and engaged citizenship. Our mission is a simple but ambitious one. We aim to prepare young people for informed and responsible participation in our constitutional democracy. So to us, that means helping students understand democratic principles and institutions, developing their civic reasoning and inquiry skills, and practicing civil discourse, especially around complex issues. And we definitely believe that civic learning is strongest when students are not just learning about democracy, but they're actively engaging in it. All right. And we have two flagship programs, as Ryan mentioned. The first flagship is We the People, the Citizen, and the Constitution. This is a K-12 curriculum focused on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the principles that shape American government. Students work with primary sources, they examine constitutional questions, and they engage in structured, evidence-based discussion. And at the secondary level, this often culminates in performance-based activities, such as simulated legislative hearings, where students will demonstrate their constitutional understanding, reasoning, and civil discourse, rather than just simply recalling facts. And I know that Ryan will be sharing out the slides afterwards, but I do have links for each of our programs specifically on our slides. So if you'd like to learn more, you can always check it out there. All right. So We the People is a content-rich civics curriculum that is certainly centered on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the principles of American democracy. So this aligns really well with Kentucky's emphasis on foundational civic knowledge. This definitely helps students understand how government is structured, how rights are protected, and how democratic principles operate in practice. And the curriculum is vertically aligned, making it adaptable across grade levels while remaining especially strong for middle and high school civics and government courses. And we do have a PDF directly on our website that has the crosswalks. There are so many, I could not fit them on a slide. So I would encourage you to check out all the crosswalks there on that hyperlink. Thanks, Ryan. All right. And so just to give you a brief overview, the curricular concepts of We the People cover the philosophical and historical foundations of the U.S. Constitution, the development and structure of the U.S. government, the role of the Constitution in everyday life, and it explores the rights and responsibilities of citizens and the importance of civic participation. The curriculum is divided into several units, which, as you see, correspond to the numbers there on your screen. So it covers a lot. Our second flagship program is Project Citizen, and this focuses on applied civic learning for grades 5 through 12. Students identify real public policy problems in their community, and they research the issue, evaluate possible solutions, and develop a reasoned policy proposal. And along the way, they build skills in research, collaboration, presentation, and civic participation. This is certainly civics as a lived experience, and students learn how public policy works by engaging directly with the process. And once again, you can reference the hyperlink there later if that program interests you further. So Project Citizen complements the foundational civics instruction by giving students the opportunity to apply what they have learned through authentic civic engagement. So students will research real public policy issues, they'll analyze solutions and practice democratic participation through public presentations. And all of this directly supports Kentucky's civic participation standards and is very effective across grade levels, especially as a project-based or capstone civic experience. All right. So our programs align very naturally with Kentucky's civics literacy requirement. So firstly, they provide strong foundational knowledge, especially constitutional principles and democratic institutions through We the People. They emphasize inquiry and critical thinking, asking students to analyze sources, evaluate evidence, and grapple with multiple perspectives. They support civic participation, including speaking, presenting, deliberating, and engaging with public issues, especially through Project Citizen. And finally, both programs rely on authentic demonstrations of learning using performance-based assessment rather than a traditional test. So in short, these programs don't just support civics literacy, they operationalize it. All right. And these programs are intentionally very flexible. They can be used in full civics or government courses. They can be embedded as units within existing social studies classes or implemented through capstones or project-based experiences. Districts and schools can adapt them at scale, and they can make the pace work for whatever works for them locally, while still meeting statewide expectations. And so we don't just provide the curriculum itself, we also support educators, and that includes professional learning, instructional resources, assessment tools, and ongoing partnerships with state and district leaders. And we do work through state partners in all 50 states. And our state partner, Glenn Mans, is here on the call. Hello, Glenn. And so our goal is to make high quality civic education sustainable and accessible for teachers and very meaningful for our students. And so we would welcome the opportunity to explore how we might support Kentucky educators as they bring the civics literacy requirement to life. And you can show the next slide there, Ryan. So I am happy to follow up with any additional materials or alignment documents or examples from other states. We have a couple of resources here as well, including our newsletter and free professional learning. And if you'd like, and if you don't already know Glenn, I'm always happy to introduce you to Glenn Mans as well. So thanks very much.
All right, thank you all so much for sharing that information with us. We're going to switch gears and talk about option 3. And so option 3 for meeting the civics literacy requirement is taking the civics test. And so a local board of education may choose this option, and the civics test must be composed of 100 questions that are drawn from the USCIS test federally, which we'll talk more about in just a moment. So there have been some recent changes to the civics test. So on October 20th, there were a few changes that were made that I'll talk about in just a moment. But I wanted to point out at first that those changes, although they've already become effective on the federal site, those changes will take place with Kentucky on July 1st. So the start of that fiscal year. So some of those changes we'll talk about next. So instead of 100 questions, which it traditionally had, there are now 128 questions. So that doesn't change from what's required. We are still only required to take 100 questions that are drawn from that test, but there are more than 100 questions in total that are offered now. So what's kind of changed about those questions? There were some questions that were added that were not there before. There were some questions that were removed, and then there were many questions that were just changed, maybe slightly with wording and stuff. So the questions have changed quite a bit with this recent revision. And another thing that changed are the categories available. So there used to be quite a few more categories of questions that were offered, but now there are just 3 main categories. And that's American government and American history, which those make up the majority of those 128 questions. And then there are a few questions toward the end that are on symbols and holidays. So for the civics test implementation, students shall be provided with the opportunity to take the test as many times as necessary for them to pass it without the use of instructional aids during testing. And to be successful and pass the civics test, they should answer at least 70% of those questions correctly. So it's also important to note that if a student has passed a similar test within the previous 5 years, they may provide the board with evidence of that, and that could satisfy that requirement in place of the civics test. And schools and districts must meet the requirements and accommodations of a student's IEP with this requirement as well. And so I will pass it on to Ryan to talk a little bit about the changes to the digital driver's license DDL platform with these civics test changes.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. And so one of the things that if you're familiar with the digital driver's license, that option is still available to use for different school districts if they so choose. What is important to notice about the DDL is that the DDL will no longer give the civics exam in 4 different sections, because that has actually changed. So students, when they take the test, will take the full 100 questions all at one time. In the past, there were some options on whether or not a student could take the entire thing or they could take it into different chunks. That option is now gone. But students will still have access to the 100 questions that will be available through the digital driver's license portal.
So just a little bit about the civics test reporting. So by September 1st of 2026, and then each year after on September 1st, each school district is required to submit their annual testing data if they choose that civics test option. And so they are going to include two different pieces of information. The first one is the first time successful completion rate of the civics test. And the second one is the average number of times a student takes the civics test for successful completion. And Ryan is going to talk to you a little bit more about the nuances of those two things that will be reported and how that will be reported.
Yeah, so one of the things that is going to be a requirement is this submitting of results data. To submit the annual testing data to the KDE, superintendents or designee must complete the civics test annual reporting Google form. When we're submitting this data, districts should submit the cumulative data for each eligible cohort of students for all the years since they entered grade 9. Local districts can access this reporting form from the Civics Test Manual, which you all will have access to, or you can find this on our website as well. Let's break this down. And so the Google form is going to look something just like this. And you're going to be looking to report two different sets of data. So the first one is the first time successful completion rate data. When entering the successful completion rate of the civics test, you're going to enter the number rounded to the nearest percentage point. It always sounds a little bit scary. It's really not. For example, if you have 100 students that are in a cohort and they are taking the exam in a particular school year and they complete it, and 80 of those students out of the 100 pass for the very first time, you're going to very easily just convert that over to a percentage. And so you would plug in 80% here. And so depending on how big your cohort is and how many students pass the very first time, you should be able to make that easy kind of conversion there. The second thing that is going to be maybe a little bit more difficult is the average number of times a student takes for successful completion. This is where you get into some situations where you have some students that may not pass it the very first time. And so we would like to see, on an average, how many times are students having to take this particular test. So this data should demonstrate the average of times for a collective group rather than individual students. So you're not going to be entering this in multiple times for every single student. This is representing a collective group. When entering the average number of times a student took to successfully complete the test, you're going to enter the number rounded to the nearest whole number. And so we're going to ask you to kind of round that. I'll give you a little bit of an example. It's a bit of an extreme example, but it kind of illustrates the point here. So imagine for a moment you only have a cohort of 4 students, and they are taking the grade, or they're taking it their 9th grade year. And each student takes, the first student takes 8 times to complete the test. The next student takes 2, the next one takes 4, the next takes 6, respectively, to pass. Essentially, you would enter the number as 5, the average as 5, because you have 8 plus 2 plus 4 plus 6 divided by 5. Obviously, you're usually going to be dealing with much larger cohorts of individuals who are doing this. And so this may take a little bit of math time. One of the things that is really important to realize is if you're giving this through the digital driver's license platform, that will also help you in calculating some of those averages and some of that information. So it is not so daunting to whoever is compiling that information. So again, this is a lot of information. There is a civics test manual that is available for potential guidance in preparation for the administration of this particular exam. And Heather's just dropped that in there. I would pull that up and save it or put a star on that one. It provides considerations for the administration, implementation, and the scoring of the results of the civics test. Additionally, the manual provides guidance on the new requirement of submitting annual civics testing data to the KDE. It also contains 2 complete 100 questions that are samples, both in short and in multiple choice formats. And so this resource is here to help you all out as you kind of navigate all of that. So essentially what we've laid out for you are kind of the 3 basic options: the 1/2 standalone credit course, the embedded half credit course, and the option for the 100 test civics exam, and how to administer that.